Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and this is episode 135, recorded on April 27th, 2015. So we're really getting into spring here, almost to May. So if you want to see all of my shows, you go to my video blog at walkinthepark.tv. And it's all there. This one will be up very soon. It'll first show on Pegasus, public access television in Ithaca, New York, channel 13, and on Thursday night, the 28th at 9 p.m., and the schedule follows after that. And you can find the whole schedule on my blog, walkinthepark.tv, and this show will be up on the blog online for online streaming by that time. Okay, so yes, it is spring, and definitely we're sort of shaking off winter here, and we get a couple of cold days and we get some warm days and so forth. So wildflowers are starting to come up in the woods in some of our preserves and parks. So we're going to take a little look at that and go to a very short video about wildflowers that I made some time ago. This one might be a little bit louder than some of the other videos on here, just to warn you. Some early woodland wildflowers in upstate New York are called spring ephemerals. They bloom and raise their leaves before the trees overhead leaf out, taking advantage of abundant light and warmth before the overhead foliage blocks most of the sun's rays for the rest of the season. By June, most spring ephemerals have completely disappeared above ground. Other woodland wildflowers are known as shade endurers. Though they send up their foliage and flowers quickly, they spend the rest of the season maturing their fruit and storing energy in their roots for the demands of next year's burst of spring growth. Okay, well, that's a very brief introduction. Actually, that one wasn't the loud one. The loud one will be coming up. Very brief introduction to our spring wildflowers that are coming up now. There are many, many, of course. And, of course, overhead, the birds are filling the trees. So, and some of the trees are themselves are blooming, leafing out, like shadbush or juneberry or serviceberry. It's all the same thing. That is in bloom now. That's kind of like our dogwood for the north. We have dogwood festivals in the south. Maybe we should have shadbush or juneberry festivals in the north, but I don't have any pictures of that, but maybe next time, we'll see. So a friend of mine, Becca Harber, who is a naturalist and an educator and an herbalist, is also a songwriter, and she loves nature and really expresses it, and she has written a beautiful song, which I actually recorded last May in Upper Buttermilk Falls State Park, and with some friends, and with Will Fuderman and Richie Holtz accompanying her on instruments. And Will Fuderman is on the mandola, and Richie is on the guitar. So this is fun. Let's take a listen to this, and it talks a lot about nature. So let's go to Spring O' Spring by Becca Harber.
Spring, oh spring, oh spring, oh spring, the buds are opening. Early woodland flowers blooming make my heart sing. Peepers are a-calling and the toads trill on warm nights. Spring, oh spring, the season of delight. Spring, oh spring, oh spring, oh spring, the trees are leafing out. A black-throated green warbler is a-singing from the bough. Woodcocks lovely wetwood sound. Wood frogs are a-clacking, and the virile goes on and on and on. Spring, oh spring, there's tadpoles in the pond. Spring, oh spring, oh spring, oh spring, the sun heats up the land. Young green shoots and ferny fronds are rising up so grand. Birds are courting, building nests, and birds are giving birth. Spring, oh spring, the cycle of earth. Go, Will. Spring, oh spring, oh spring, oh spring, red-ups are out again, walking in the leaf debris amidst the wet green glens. Wild leaf carpets sprinkled with blue cohosh and trillium. Spring, another cycle starts again. Spring, oh spring, oh spring, oh spring, the buds are opening. Early woodland flowers blooming make my heart sing. Peepers are calling and the toads trill on warm nights. Spring, oh spring, the season of delight. Spring, oh spring, the season of delight. Nice.
Okay, that's a really heartwarming song. She definitely throws her heart into loving nature. So this is, once again, Walk in the Park, walkinthepark.tv. You can go see all the shows, all the episodes. This is episode 135. We've been doing this for a few years now. So when you go out to enjoy the spring, of course, around here, people love to go to our gorges. And this gorge is, let's see where we are. It's Teganic Gorge. Look at that. You're not going to get this view very easily. See if I can get the, it's Southern Tier Balloon Tours took this picture just recently. And there we go. Yeah, Southern Tier Balloon Tours. And this is looking above Teganic Gorge. And right in the middle of the picture is the top of the waterfall where it plunges 215 feet down into the main canyon. And at the very top of the picture, actually, there is Cayuga Lake, the sort of whitish area. That is actually Cayuga Lake. And that is just a spectacular view. So, yes, the gorge is open, and the rim trails should be open. So, yeah, Teganic's a good place to go. And the gorge at Buttermilk Falls State Park has been opened, and you can go there. But there are some other parks that are only partially open. Robert H. Treman State Park, most of the trails are open, but the upper gorge, the gorge trail, I should say. Actually, I'm not sure how much the gorge trail is open, but I know the upper gorge has not been opened yet. And why is that? Also, Watkins Glen is in the process of slowly opening up. So why is it these gorges are only partially open? Well, it has to do with the cliffs. This is a guy at Watkins Glen a few years ago, a guy named Jason, who is rappelling down the cliff. He's right on the cliff face there. I don't know if you can make out the two ropes that are coming down to him. And then he has in his arms a pole or a fireman's pike, and he is pulling off loose rock that has been loosened by the winter frost. Now, this shale and siltstone that we have here is in our gorges is very susceptible to frost action. Freezing and thawing in the winter, water gets in, freezes, and pushes the rock out, and it has to be cleaned off the rock as much as is possible above the trails before they can safely open the trails. So that's what he is doing. So I'm going to show you a short video, not there but at Treman, and this was done about 5 years ago, and I mentioned I was there April 11th. Well, it was April 11th, 2011 that I was there. In any case, this is the loud one, or a little bit louder anyway, so just to warn you. But pretty cool. You'll see some of these guys actually in action. They're not all guys, actually. So here we go. On April 11th, I walked along the rim trail at Robert H. Treman State Park to get a view of Lucifer Falls. After a few minutes, I walked 150 feet away to look down Enfield Glen. While I was there, I heard a tremendous roar and crash from a rock slide back by the falls. I hurried back to see the falls all muddy, presumably from a big rock slide in the gorge upstream. In the spring, many people wonder why they can't hike right away on sections of the gorge trails in the state parks of the Finger Lakes region. It's because the winter ice has loosened the shale rock of the cliffs above the trails. Before the trails can be opened safely, park employees, called scalers, must physically remove as much loose rock as possible. Supported by rope handlers, the scalers systematically rappel down the cliffs. The scalers use a fireman's pike pole to knock off winter-loosened shale. Okay, that's all I can show with that. I've got another video I want to show you here. Where it's also a lot of people are thinking about boating, fishing, getting their kayaks out and canoes and sailboats and getting them in the water. And so I'm going to show us a short video from a workshop put on by Cayuga Lake Watershed Network and the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary Station in Ithaca on boating, on cleaning our boats so that we don't spread invasive species. So we'll go right to that.
The Marine Safety, Marine Environmental Protection Staff Officer for Division 2. Now, Division 2 runs from Oswego, New York, down to Ithaca. Now, obviously, because this is my flotilla, Cayuga Lake is one of my primary concentrations, and we've been helping out with hydrilla hunt. We've been doing soundings and sampling east and west shore for about 3 years now. Also, when they treat the inlet with endothol, we will shut it off so that the boats don't come down through, do that sort of thing. I am going to talk briefly in a couple minutes about a New York State law that you need to be aware of. It's called Clean, Drain, and Dry. And hopefully by the time I'm done with my 10-minute dissertation, you'll be sick to death about CDD, Clean, Drain, Dry, but you'll know what it's about and why we're concerned about it. What we're looking to do today is, this is our first, hopefully in a series, that I will run for anyone that's an educator, etc. Get resources together so that we can talk to the community, students, etc. with regards to our environment and our need to keep our environment pristine, okay? So, a couple introductions and stuff. We have Hillary Lambert, Cayuga Watershed, that a lot of you all know. Mr. Foster just joined us, back from the monarch butterfly and everything. So at any given time, when we get into topics that you want to ask really technical questions and stuff, I will immediately fade into the wall and point to these two guys to answer the questions, okay? But we'll get into it. So that's what we are. There is one or two other comments I want to make. Coast Guard Auxiliary. We are one. We are not the Coast Guard. We are volunteers in our mission that the Coast Guard has given us, and it's been this way actually since roughly World War II. We augment in areas that they just plain don't have the staffing and the manpower to cover. So right now, in today's world, what we work on is boating safety and the environment are our major two issues. So we promote and improve boating education, boating safety education, etc., plus the environmental issues. World War II, etc., which is when this unit got started, 1942. What we were concerned about was to have more eyes and ears out on the waterway looking to see if there was something going on that the Navy or the Coast Guard needed to be aware of. Now here in Ithaca, obviously it wasn't a heck of a lot, but any of the flotillas on the east shore or the west coast, they were obviously very much engaged looking for submarines and all that kind of good stuff. All right, so it's volunteer, that sort of thing. So while we're waiting for this to queue up, I'll cover some of my slides verbally. Number one, I mentioned it earlier, and I'll mention it again. That New York State has now created a law that says that it's called Clean, Drain, and Dry Law. So if you want to Google it, that's where you'll find it. And what we're to do is to make sure that our boats and all of our gear are not transporting invasive species. Have a seat any place, or we'll pull up some chairs for you. That we're not transporting any invasive species from one body of water to the next. The other thing I'd have you think about is just that, here we are on a finger lake, but we're really on international waters. Think about it. I go up through here, I go through the Erie Canal system, I go the Oswego River on my Lake Ontario, I'm in the St. Louis River. So the environment that we have, let's pick on hydrilla, and I've got it on board, I can transport that throughout the chain. You've got round goby, you know, she comes down through, it's discharged off of ballast, you know, that they take on, put it into the lakes, into water, and she's throughout the system. So that's how this comes to be. So it's a law. Now, areas that we find that what people need to be aware of when they launch or particularly take their boat out of the water is they need to be cognizant that they've usually got vegetation someplace on this trailer. Now the license plates, lights, that's a prime area where I've got my front crank, etc. Taking a look at it. So you want to look around all of these areas, and when you remove the vegetation, if you're at a DEC launch site, they most probably will have a receptacle to put it into. New York State has got funding, so they're going to be putting dumpsters and areas, pits, where you put it. You do not put it back in the water. Things like hydrilla, 1,000 heads, worst thing that can happen is we break that up. It can last 5 to 7 days before it dies, and we move that from one body of water to the other. So I'm going to check my trailer, my frame, my boat, and on the next place I'm going to look for my props, anything that I've got, lines on board my boat, etc., to make sure that I don't have it. We have spiny water fleet. I don't know how many of you are aware of it. It gets on your line, fouls up your casting, etc. You do not clip the line and throw it back in water. Number one, you don't want that monofilament in there so birds and fish and everything else ingest it. That's number one. And number two is that you've not solved the problem. So you cut it, keep it, and dispose of it properly when you're all done with your fishing. All right, so just to highlight, you know, the motor, the prop, the trailer, all of these areas, these are areas that we're looking to make sure that when you leave that ramp, that you've made sure you've gotten all the vegetation and everything out of and off of and disposed of properly. Next is with regards to draining. So I'm going to make sure that all my bilges, my buckets, my live wells, etc. are taken care of, and again, dumped properly into dumpsters, etc. I do not want any of that stuff thrown back into that body of water, and I do not want to transport it from one body of water to the next. Dry, 5 days is what we're looking for dry. Now I know that that's not always practical, and I know that with the fishermen, if I'm not catching them on a Wasco Lake, I might go over to Skaneateles or I might go someplace else. But as much as possible, we're wanting that to be dried and sit out of the water for 5 days. If you go up to Star Lake, up into the Adirondacks, they will jump all over you. What was the last body of water you were on? How long has it been out and dried? Did you clean it? For those of us that kayak, they check the swim bladders, because if you've got it on your paddle and jam it up by the swim bladder, you'll have vegetation hanging there. So make sure that everybody's, not just I've been picking on the fishermen, it's everybody, kayakers, canoes, etc. Your fishing gear, you know, your waders, your nets, all of that stuff should be checked and make sure that you've got it out. All right, what we are doing is for our area, that's that Oswego to Ithaca area. We're going to be launching this year, and this is part of the kickoff, where not only will I offer vessel safety equipment exams, where you can request that we take a look and make sure that you are properly equipped and give you recommendations on the use of, etc. We will be coupling that along with this Clean Drain Dry initiative, and we'll be handing out flyers, these flyers, and we will be talking a bit to those that we do the vessel inspections and pass them around. about what they need to do and what they need to be cognizant of so that they're not transporting some invasive species from one body of water to the next. I've got a couple more slides in here because I do this with high school students and college kids in watercraft space or the inspection. Sea Grant has a program that they've applied for a grant. Finger Lakes, Prism has applied for a grant. You have some lake associations, such as Skinny Atlas, Honey Eyes, etc. If you've got a college student that's looking to do this, contact me and I'll be glad to put them in contact, or they can go on the web and check it out themselves directly, because there's a lot of good steward programs. Skinny Atlas is another one. By the way, Skinny Atlas, when you show up, they'll meet you, they'll have a clipboard, they have 2 pages worth of questions that they're going to ask you. Why? Because it's a secondary source of water for Syracuse, New York, with Lake Ontario being the primary. So they want to make sure that they keep it as pristine as possible. All right, so with that as a preamble, I'll turn this over to Hillary. Any questions, comments, or rude remarks for me? Well,
Okay. That's just about done anyway. And we're running out of time. So thank you very much for joining me. And we'll continue discussion of some of these topics in future episodes this spring. So see you next time.